Not every dad can be an Indiana Jones, so there's no reason why he can't at least wear the hat. Just look at some of the folks who do. Bareheaded dad, Russ Mitchell now, with a brief history of the hat.
Jeff, you're just like your father. Thank you, sir. Even to the hat.
From Jefferson Smith's innocence in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, to Michael Corleone's ascent to Don in The Godfather, to Indiana Jones's heroism in Raiders of the Lost Ark, a hat always makes a statement. These days, wearing a hat says you are fashion forward and, dare we say, hip.
I always say there's a hat for everybody.
The accessory that began at the pinnacle of practicality is now all about style.
Hat trends have been driven by the media. You know, they've been driven by movies, they've been driven by music artists. I mean, period.
It's a lightweight hat, and you want to make sure that the hat is on good.
Rod Springer and Mark Williamson work at JJ Hat Center in New York City, one of the oldest hat stores in the country, boasting 10,000 hats in stock. Williamson says about 1% of men wear hats regularly.
The people who are into fashion buy a little more frequently, but there was a point in time where, let's say 10 years ago, where the market was just hardcore hat buyers, and then you had older men.
That feels good. You like that, huh? Take a look, see what you think.
In the 19th and early 20th centuries, wearing a hat was a hardcore social convention. Simply put, hats were mandatory for men.
Without your hat, you were naked, you were unprepared, and people would assume there was something wrong with you.
Neil Steinberg is a Chicago Sun-Times columnist turned hat authority. Steinberg says hats were of such importance that when Vice President Harry Truman was notified of President Roosevelt's death, he did not, as instructed, go immediately to the White House.
He started to run down the hall, and then he doubled back and went to his office and got his hat. Okay, because why did he need his hat? To be able to face the world.
That idea lasted through the mid-1900s. During those years, more conventional hats were consistently replaced by hats considered more jaunty for the era.
I just got an invitation through the mails.
The top hats, worn by gentlemen every day in the late 1800s and turn of the century, was worn more formally in the 1930s and 40s, as exemplified by Fred Astaire, especially in the musical Top Hat.
Or I'll be there, putting down my top hat, mussing up my white.
By that point, the less fussy bowler or derby hat, made famous by Charlie Chaplin, was the fashion among the working set.
We were a pedestrian and an equestrian culture. That's why hats like bowlers, like derbies, and top hats were hard, because they were to protect your head if you got hit in the head with a branch.
Or perhaps a cane. In the 1920s, the 20-something Al Capone was known for donning, among other things, a fedora.
The scene is very jazzy and modern. You weren't your father who'd be wearing a bowler or derby, some other kind of older man's hat.
Hello, sugar.
In the noir classic The Big Sleep, Humphrey Bogart's wisecracking ladies' man, Private Eye Philip Marlowe, became the embodiment of everything a fedora was supposed to bestow.
Morning, Fairchild. Good morning, sir.
But for his wealthy businessman Linus Larrabee in Sabrina, only the staid Homburg would do.
It's considered like a boss hat, you know, also considered to be the banker's hat, you know.
By 1953, most hats, even the fedora, were being rejected by the younger set.
Look at those men. They were supposed to be inconspicuous.
You asked for plain clothes.
The hat is lampooned in Roman Holiday when the staff of the royal court tries to blend in while searching for Audrey Hepburn's princess, who's gone missing, with the dashing and hatless Gregory Peck.
We used to be much more status, class conscious, and that sort of thing isn't as foremost in our minds anymore, for good and ill. And I think once you lose the social necessity, your men just didn't bother them.
Among the young men who just didn't bother, John F. Kennedy. He is notoriously blamed for the demise of hats. But Neil Steinberg says it's just not true.
John F. Kennedy was doing what every other man in his generation was doing, is he wasn't wearing a hat. But because he came into the public eye, people started to notice it. And then what happened was hat makers picked up on it, and they decided, we've got to get him. We've got to get him to wear a hat.
JFK agreed to wear the customary top hat to his inauguration, but it went largely unnoticed by the public and unappreciated by hat unions.
People think he didn't wear one because he had it in his lap most of the time.
Conventional hats were linked to the establishment. So, for hip hat fashions, jazz musicians led the way with a pork pie and a narrow brim topper known as the stingy fedora.
Because they were anti-establishment. If you were wearing a pork pie, you were a rebel.
Today, the hats are enjoying a revival, with the stingy fedora edging out the pork pie as the most popular.
And it has that, you know, quote-unquote cool factor. I hate to say that, but it definitely just looks very laid back and easy, but very, you know, handsome.
But one stingy brim fad does not a tradition make.
Remember, this is a niche market. You won't see every man on the street wearing hats again. I definitely don't believe that.
They used to be a sign of conformity, and now they're a sign of individuality. And there's something wonderful about that.